1998 Dodge Ram. Got a complaint of no speedometer, lack of power, anti-lock brake warning light. I've driven it, and yeah, there is a lack of power and there is no speedometer. So first thing we're going to do is check codes like we always do. It's a good starting point. So I'm using a Phoenix Light 2 today. We could try to do an auto scan, but being a 1998, this vehicle is going to be too old for that. It's going to try and fail, and then we'll just enter in the vehicle information. Well, when I did the Chrysler vehicle scan, it did pull the VIN number. That's actually surprising for 1998. So anyways, we'll let that run. Another thing is that he wanted me to check out the interior. He had this all taped up, and it looks like somebody's replaced this at some point with aftermarket parts or something, because there's like nothing, see that? There's nothing for the trim to even pop into. So I think this is an aftermarket dash pad. As well as he wanted to do a safety inspection and just check out the whole vehicle and see what else it needs, which we're going to do. Looks like our code scan has come up with something. I saw something red. There we go. We got anti-lock brake system fault and airbag, it looks like. Okay, so right front sensor open, rear sensor open. This is an airbag fault. So he did not care to have me look at the airbag fault. So he doesn't care about the airbag light at the moment. We're just going to concentrate on the lack of power, the anti-lock brakes, and the fact that we have no speedometer. So if you know anything about these old 98 Dodge Rams, you would know that the rear speed sensor, the rear anti-lock brake speed sensor, actually serves as the speedometer, the sensor for the speedometer also, and it serves as the transmission output speed sensor. So Chrysler was smart about it. They said, why do we need two sensors doing the same thing? We could just have one sensor in the rear doing everything for us. So from here, what I would do is consult the anti-lock brakes wiring diagram and just see what that looks like and come up with a plan from there, as well as a visual inspection. So I also happen to know, because he told me he had a bunch of suspension work. See, we got new shocks, we got I think he had all new front steering, had a bunch of work done to it at a place that rhymes with S and Wob. Don't know what place that would be, but apparently the anti-lock brakes light was still on when they were done with it, and he didn't want to go back to them. So here we are. Make sure that's not hot. Well, that's not good. So this has a Jasper engine. So the engine was replaced at some point. New engine, but they didn't put a new radiator in it. So whoever put the new engine in it just reused this nasty old radiator. I mean, that looks like almost plain water. So, and let me stick that cap back on so I don't make a mess. I could actually listen to that. There's like debris on the inside of that hose. That's nasty. So I can actually feel a lot of it in here. So whoever replaced the engine and reused the coolant hoses and radiator, Not cool. So I don't really care to crawl underneath this at the moment in the mud. So I'll get it pulled inside for that visual inspection, but we will take it for a quick drive also, because I want to see if there's any speed sensor data at all. Is it working at all? Is that wet? Look at that. That looks wet. And he told me that they just did a bunch of work in the rear too. So we'll check all this stuff out. Gonna end up taking care of this nasty wiring too. Notice how this does not even have a fuse on it. So if this wire here were to short out inside the body, you'd have a fire. You'd have an unstoppable fire until something just melted down. So the exhaust system is another thing he mentioned, because our tailpipe should be back here, and yet he's getting smoked out. He's telling me he's getting sick from it, and I can see why. We got some ratty exhaust being held together by wire, so we're gonna probably take care of the exhaust system for him also. Alright, so we're about to take our road test. We're going to get into anti-lock brake system data stream. So we want left front, rear wheel speed, and right front. Okay, and we'll graph them. And then we'll get going down the road. Transmission does not want to shift properly right now because we have no vehicle speed information. We have no vehicle speed from any of those wheel speed sensors. So we're going around a corner. You guys probably can't hear that, but there is a nasty howl noise from the rear axle as I go around corners. Let's see, it's a lot worse on a right-hand turn. You hear that? There's something nasty going in the rear axle, and he told me that he just had it worked on, so that's not good. So we already know that we need to go back and inspect the ABS system. We need to do some circuit tests for the sensors, because we have all three sensors not working. We also have a lack of power complaint. Since we're out here driving, we can test that for that at the same time. So I'm gonna come almost to a stop and then basically floor it. Wide open throttle acceleration test. And it is really struggling. Won't even get into the next gear. So I let off the throttle a little bit, and then it'll shift into second. It just will not accelerate. It's got no power. But if I let it shift into the next gear, I can just keep going. So I think we need to look at some engine data at this point and determine what's going on for the lack of power. So I'm going to pull off. Okay, we're going to switch up our data stream. We're going to look at the powertrain control module data. Take a look at some data PIDs that I might check if I had a lack of power. Calculated engine load. Barrow would be a good one to check. But for the moment, let's just find out, because when we have a severe lack of power like that and it's really acting like it's got either not enough fuel or a completely plugged exhaust, I think I would look at engine RPM. We want vacuum. And where's our oxygen sensors? Vehicle speed. We already know that we don't have a vehicle speed signal at the moment. Upstream O2 sensor. Where's the downstream? Way back up here. Downstream O2 sensor. Okay, that's what we wanted. Graph. And we'll do a screen recording. Just in case we need some stable viewing later. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go do that same wide open throttle acceleration test. And if you know anything about fuel systems, you know that when we mash the pedal to the floor, the fuel system should peg rich. We should have a full rich condition, meaning we have so much fuel that we can't even burn it all because we don't have enough oxygen in the cylinder. So if this sensor pegs rich, then we know we have enough fuel. We know we have enough fuel pressure. We know we have the fuel injectors are working, whatever. If it pegs lean, we know the engine is starving for fuel. So at this point, we're going to monitor this data and go do another wide open throttle test. Okay, we're monitoring our oxygen sensor data. I'm going to come to almost a complete stop and then mash it. Really struggling to get going, and it just won't get into the next gear. If I allow it to get into the next gear and then mash it again, it just won't go. Okay, now take a look at this engine data. Oh, there goes my scan. During that wide open throttle, both of the upstream and the downstream sensors pegged rich. So let me mash it again. We're going downhill at the moment. When you're going downhill with the throttle closed, the fuel injector should essentially shut off, and at that point your oxygen sensors should go both flatline lean, and they are. You can see right here we've gone flatline lean. Let me downshift it again. So we're downshifting, we're decelerating down a hill, flatline lean. So you know that you can at least trust both of these sensors. Okay, coming up to the stop sign. I'm gonna mash it again. So right now I'm just kind of cruising up the hill. The oxygen sensors are switching normally. I'm gonna mash the throttle and then we should see it peg rich. Both oxygen sensors are pegging rich. So whatever's causing our lack of power is not a lack of fuel. So now it started snowing. The window is just refusing to defrost. We're back at Moonbase Zeta. All right, well, I let the truck sit in here for about a day and a half, let all the snow melt off. After the road test, we decided that we think there's probably a plugged exhaust. And the reason I say that is because of the engine data and the fact that when I was driving it, oh, look at that, missing bolt there. When I was driving it, I could actually hear like a hissing noise, like shh. You could really hear air trying to get out somewhere, right? Well, I'm inspecting the exhaust and I see a broken manifold bolt right there. Broken exhaust manifold bolt. And you can't really see much on the camera, but the coloration of the pipe down there, the coloration of the catalyst, just from experience, it looks like it's been hot. On this side, also another broken manifold bolt. And back there. So this one has 2 broken manifold bolts. And so we've got nasty wiring, we've got nasty cooling system to take care of. We've got exhaust restriction, most likely, is what I think. Let me get underneath. Well, I've got a light set up down here. Okay. And this is the coloration I'm talking about right here. It just suggests that this cat got hot at some point. Looks like somebody has replaced a section of pipe at some point for some reason. You wouldn't really have to do that to get the transmission out, but maybe to get the oil pan out. I don't know if that's something related to replacing the engine. Also, the pipe is touching the bell housing there, so we know they didn't really get it quite lined up right. That's the upstream oxygen sensor I'm going to be removing to do the back pressure test. Can I be in position right there? Going to be removing that sensor. And if you had a lack of power and you suspected a plugged exhaust, you could just remove that sensor and just go drive it. And hey, if it feels better, if it runs better, you basically solved it. You got a clogged cat. But I actually have a pressure gauge I'm going to install so we can take a measurement. Let me reposition the light so I can take a look back by the tailpipe. All right, so we've got ratty exhaust. Somebody rigged it with some wire there. Muffler is not salvageable. Look at that, it's just falling apart. That would explain why they have it wired together. We've got the tailpipe that's basically nothing. So I think what we're probably going to end up doing in the end is that this truck just needs a whole exhaust. We know we have broken manifold bolts. We know we need basically new exhaust all the way back. So let's just continue with the pressure test. While I'm down here, this thing is stinking up the garage like gear oil. And remember, we've got a nasty grinding noise on a right-hand turn, so that would suggest that this left side axle bearing is damaged. And they just worked on it. They just took all this stuff apart. Yeah, it's gear oil. It smells like gear oil. It's all over the wheel. I'm using my oxygen sensor socket. I bought new back in the day. I don't even know who makes this. Does it even say? It says SP Tools. That thing's kind of tight up to the transmission. I don't know, I might have to get a wrench. A winch. Got up at the top and disconnected the connector there. Make it looky. Got it to move, so that's a good sign. It is a little tight. Just wiggle it back and forth and break up the rust. I'm going to struggle with this and get it out and then put that gauge in there, so stand by. Yeah, fighting some rust. Just a propane torch. It doesn't get that hot. I don't want to apply too much heat anyway. I'm just trying to make things move, break up rust. Got a little more movement out of it. I might have to let that cool down a little bit and then hit it with some more lubricant. Basically I'm gonna keep warming it up, wiggle it back and forth. That's going to break up the rust so that I can successfully get this out of here without tearing up the sensor. Although it looks like the sensor is ancient and needs to be replaced anyway. But if I do need to reinstall this sensor, I don't want to completely trash these threads here because I forced it out. So let me keep working at this. I only got another turn or so out of it. All that it really did was make a stinky mess. That's basically all I'm gonna do until it comes out. Could take a while, but that's what we have to do because I don't want to destroy these threads. Starting to come loose. The connector's broken anyway, so it's replaced. Starting to come loose. I've been working it back and forth. I've been forcing it. It's getting hard there, but we're almost there. Break up that rust. There we go, it's coming out now. It's still a little warm. Okay, let me grab the gauge. Kind of a struggle to get the threads started. I don't want to ruin the tool either. I want to make sure those threads are actually engaged. And I think the threads on the bung are screwed up, so I'm probably not going to fully install it. Yeah, I can feel that it's all chewed up in there, and I don't want to ruin the threads on this gauge here. So that's as far as I'm going to tighten it. It's in here enough, you know, an exhaust system's not really supposed to have much pressure on it. The gauge here obviously has some miles on it, so this is where we're at. We're going to call this our 0. We should ideally have basically nothing on this gauge. And when I start up the engine, you should have nothing on this gauge. So that'll tell us one way or the other. So I've got the gauge propped up here. Remember, this is our 0. I'm going to go start the engine now. We'll see what happens. Well, it looks like we have our answer on the plugged exhaust question, because you should not even see this gauge really do anything. You should see, obviously the green mark is basically almost at 0. On an exhaust back pressure test, you should see no more than 1 to 3 psi. So I think I saw the gauge literally max out and almost circle around again. So this the cat converter, is completely clogged. So that answers the lack of power question. The catalytic converter is completely clogged. We need to replace the complete exhaust system because we've got leaky manifolds left and right. We've got a catalytic converter. The white pipe has been hacked up and cut. The cat itself is clogged. The rest of the system is just held together with wire and just rusted to pieces. So this vehicle literally needs a complete new exhaust system front to back. So we'll see about doing that. It needs a new radiator. It needs the rear axle looked at because it's got a nasty grinding noise. It's got an axle fluid leak. And we're going back to the anti-lock brakes. Why is it that we have no wheel speed sensors out of neither the left or the right front sensor? So there's 3 sensors. We have no speed signals from any of them. We had codes, signal. I think we had codes for left, right, no signal, and we had a rear sensor open. So at this point, we're going to take a look at the wiring schematic and decide what to do from there.